Oh man, I'm just enjoying the glory and beauty that is my background. So today I'm coming to you from a special location, not just a bomb shelter, not just a storage closet, but this room, actually sitting over at this desk over here. This room is where I was first putting fingers on the keys and beginning to write Voices from the Chicago Grave way back in probably around the year 2000. The documentary came out in 1999, and I knew really quickly that I'm into this stuff more than I thought about than I thought I would be when I started the documentary. And I came across so many great stories that I want to keep delving into this bizarre topic of the paranormal. And a book, well, actually, a documentary wouldn't cut it because you only have so much time to tell so many stories. And also, at that time, my plan when I was first starting off the book was I would be doing a CD-ROM. So when I was, again, this is the year 2000. And first off, we are going to be talking about Los Angeles ghost stories, great ghost stories and haunted locations around LA and Hollywood. We are doing the A to Z challenge, and I'm running behind, terribly behind, of course, but we are up to the letter L, and we will be getting into Los Angeles and Hollywood ghost stories. But I just want to explain why I'm exactly right here with this horrendous background. You can see, look at all those VHS tapes. Again, I started out as an editor, a video editor back in the day, and actually probably a lot of the first haunted locations that I ever went to with my home video camera, recording for the documentary. That's probably on those tapes, right? Actually, I can see these are some of the master tapes from when I was editing Voices from the Chicago Grave, these plastic guys back here. Anyway, so yeah, it started out, I was going to do a CD-ROM because, technology was new at the time. And the idea that, hey, you could write like a book, but in addition to not having to cover printing costs and all that kind of stuff, and that's the weight of shipping, stuff like that, you could also incorporate as many photos as you want because it's endless. You have so much space. In a book, you only have a finite amount of space, and then you could embed video clips too. And that's what I was really excited by, the idea of putting out this immersive product. And then at that time, you can see how much things have changed, because now I think this would be viable again. But at that time, the idea was, well, nobody's going to want to sit at their computer that long, and nobody's going to want to read on their computer that long. And so I changed course and I put out a book. But all that other multimedia, the book was packaged with a CD-ROM that was only visual. So you could read your book like a normal book. This is before ebooks and all that kind of stuff. But so you could read your book and then also pop in the CD and explore a little bit more, still get the full immersive feeling. And of course, then later on, a publisher came along and they said, we want to publish your book and we'll expand on it and do all kinds of cool stuff, but we're not going to be packaging it with other material. So you handle that on your own. So I then put the CD-ROM online, and that's what What's Your Ghost Story? That's where that started. Anyway, so there's my backstory. Not that anybody's here for that reason, but again, just to explain why I'm in this spider hole. We got other foreign dignitaries that are hiding out because of war crimes that they've committed, also down in this bunker with me. So we are talking Los Angeles, though. So I had life has been very good to me. Quite honestly, I was able to move out to Los Angeles about 10 years ago, and I spent 8 years living in LA, in the city of angels. I went out to school, went out there for school at first. That's not part of those 8 years. That was before then. And eventually, after working in Hawaii and Chicago and film, getting very regular work as a PA, I knew that if I wanted to move up that chain, I needed to move to LA. And no matter what, wherever I was living, whatever movies or shows I was working on, I always tried to get involved with, or at least look around the world of ghost stories and haunted sites. And it was not too long before the wonderful Ursula Bielski out here in Chicago, she said, hey, what do you think about starting up a tour company? And that is what lit a fire under me to get moving. Researching and, feet to the pavement, go out, visit haunted places, learn, read, and absorb as much as I can. Me especially, I'm casually going to be picking up on things. And a really cool thing that has continued throughout my career working in film is you end up shooting at bizarre locations, undesirable locations very frequently because it's cheap to rent that space. It's cheap to get the permitting. You're not necessarily having to do a lot of crowd control because maybe you're in a really remote place or a place that people don't want to go to. And sometimes those end up being haunted locations. And that was how I first found Linda Vista Hospital. And I guess I won't go into this a heck of a lot because I've covered it a bunch, but Linda Vista Hospital, built 1924. Also, by the way, one of the reasons I didn't do one of these videos yesterday is because yesterday I gave 4 speeches in person and then I had to get on a full day of work after that. So I was a little bit worn out after my marathon day. And I talked about Linda Vista Hospital 4 times yesterday. So I'll do the Cliff's Notes version. But Linda Vista Hospital is beautiful hospital built 1924 by I think it was the Santa Fe Railroad Company. And it's in Boyle Heights, which is East Los Angeles. And, it was made to serve the railroad employees that were living there. And there was a really horrific train crash that this hospital is kind of known for because it treated lots and lots of casualties from this, people injured and many people killed and maimed, where a guy fell asleep at the wheel. And when he woke up, the conductor, I should say, of the train fell asleep. And when he woke up, he thought he was in an entirely different location. And he was barreling down at 60 or 70 miles an hour. But unbeknownst to him, he was coming up on a curve where he was supposed to be at about 15 miles an hour. So, of course, the train derailed, and it was in a residential area, poorer community, small shacks. And you have a derailed train barreling through a neighborhood, cars flying all over the place. It was a horrendous moment. And Linda Vista Hospital was there for that. Jump ahead to the 90s. Linda Vista Hospital and Boyle Heights was in the middle of a lot of gang battles. Eventually, Linda Vista was the triage center for people that were caught in the crosshairs of gang violence in the 90s. And that was kind of what that hospital became about. And over the years, lack of funding, other lawsuits, Linda Vista was shut down. It was closed down, and it sat vacant from the later 90s until just a couple of years ago. And in that time, I shouldn't say it sat vacant but it was not in business as a hospital. When any large structure becomes, especially in LA, it becomes a great place to shoot a movie. So the movie Pearl Harbor, all the scenes that took place in hospitals in Pearl Harbor was shot there. Spoiler alert, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer's mom died in that hospital right there. So that gut-wrenching episode was shot at Linda Vista Hospital. Lots and lots and lots of movies and TV were shot right there, and as well as music videos. I stumbled across, I think it was Bleed Like Me, Garbage music video. I didn't realize it was shot there, and I'm watching it thinking, oh, this is Linda Vista. And then you get some wider shots like, yeah, this is absolutely Linda Vista Hospital. Hey Ho, is that the Lumineers or December? No, I think it's maybe the Lumineers, but their video, they make the place look so rosy and nice with their circus lighting through the hallways and stuff. But no, it's a creepy old hospital. So I guess I didn't talk about this so much the other day, but my first ever time visiting Linda Vista Hospital, I was working on a movie. You get your call sheets the day before. Call sheet is what your call time is, your report time is on a movie set, what the address is, we're expected to be in what time. And it actually runs down the entire schedule and a lot of information. I'm a nerd for paperwork when it comes to movie making, and that's something I liked a lot. So I won't get into it because nobody's interested. So I report to set. I'm just going to an address. I don't know where I'm going. And I pull in, and it's this beautiful Art Deco hospital that's creepy as hell looking because it's weathering away. Park, I go in, I start to go to work, and really not knowing a thing about this place beforehand, any chance I could walk away and escape set and just wander, I did. And that's how I filled up my day, escaping work, more or less. And it was a very unique place. For the most part, I was just exploring because it was cool. It was a big old building that was mostly uninhabited, mostly abandoned. We would shoot in one area that left 99% of the rest of the building just empty, and I would wander around. And even while wandering around, I could tell that, oh, okay, movies definitely shoot here because I see gear that's left behind, or fake walls that were put up but aren't in use right now. Maybe another production is going to come back to it when we're out of here. Maybe people just left stuff behind. So I know this is an active place for film. And I eventually I walk into a room that feels like an operating theater. It's not really a theater, like there's not people that can watch, but it seems like a surgery room. So while I'm trying to take some pictures in there, I just have my crappy at the time cell phone camera, because this is when I was first out in LA. And it was, I've never had good cameras for the most part until recently. So cell phone cameras, that is. But I felt really like somebody else was in that room with me, and I felt like I was being sized up, if there was something negative there, and it was kind of looking me up and down. And I tried to get out of my head, because I thought, well, maybe I'm just being creeped out by this dark room that looks like surgery happened here, and I'm in this creepy old hospital. So I really tried to push it out of my head. And usually I don't have those types of feelings. I tend to be very level-headed. But this one, I kind of couldn't shake it, but I put it out of my head, thinking, forcing myself to believe that I was just getting into my head. Eventually, I got through the day. I went home and immediately started doing research on Linda Vista Hospital, and immediately find out that, oh, goodness gracious, this place is haunted. And one of the biggest ghost stories comes out of the 1990s, again, when this was the crosshairs of different gang battles that were going on down in the Boyle Heights, East LA area. And one of the stories involves a guy, a gang member, that was shot and brought in for surgery to remove the bullet. He passed away on the table. The surgeon that was working on him could not save him. And when that doctor finished for the day, went out to his car, that gang members, grieving family members, fellow gang members, were waiting for the surgeon. And the guy that was trying to save their friend's life and just couldn't do it, but working to save his life, he ended up getting killed by those grieving people. Just completely ridiculous that this guy would be now a victim because he was not able to help out enough, even though he was trying. So apparently it's his angry spirit that is left behind. And anger is definitely something I picked up on. Not so much anger, but it was definitely dark, and it was hostile. Hostile is actually a really good way to say it. And it's picked up on in that room. He's even been photographed. And of course, it's always kind of blurry and hazy, but I've seen photos where it is still, well, it seems out of focus, and, ghosts are never sharp. Not like this. You can see that he's wearing his operating scrubs. You can see a person standing there, and he's absolutely in the right attire for a guy that's going into surgery. So that's pretty amazing. I had the huge, amazing, wonderful opportunity. I was invited to come back to that place. So I should say, there's the main general hospital, and then on a separate detached building, there is a psych ward wing. And again, that's where they were handling people that were not safe enough, they were too dangerous for the general population, and they were being taken care of. And we all know the history of taking care of mentally incapacitated people has never been positive in our history. Who knows what was really going on back there? It is more recent history, but still, the Dark Ages lasted a lot longer when it came to mental health care. And that place was even off limits to ghost hunters, because the paranormal attacks that would happen there, scratches, people being pushed, there was a violent energy that was ubiquitous through the place. So I visited the place a handful of times through the years, just kind of stopping in to say hi. There was a Ghost Boyle Heights paranormal group kind of oversaw the place, so I would stop in and say hi on occasion. And one day, they when I went in, they said this property was just sold to a developer who is going to make this location an old folks home, retirement home. And before I could even say anything, because I think he knew what the windup was when he saw my reaction, he said, "No, they're not going to use that other building. They're either just going to leave it untouched or tear it down, but they're not going to use that building for the retirement community. Like, okay, thank God. It's still creepy that they'll be hanging out in this definitely haunted hospital, but at least they won't be victimized by this malevolent force, whatever is over there. And then another year goes by. I get called up the last weekend before the new owners were to take over the TV show. The production company Awesomeness TV wanted to shoot something there for a Halloween special, and they wanted me to be part of it. Like, oh my gosh, this is incredible! What a great opportunity! And this place is so iconic and famous, and then to be invited to be back there and be the last person to do a public ghost hunt. And of course, the production team is going to be there and document it all. Yeah, what an awesome opportunity. And I was absolutely disturbed to find out that when I pulled up, there were already people living in the psych ward building. So they started by putting people into that building. Now, I ended up finding out later that they had a tough time keeping tenants, that people would move in and then move out. Don't know if it's because of paranormal encounters or what, but yeah. So Linda Vista, and so that Awesomeness TV episode, so I won't really go into it a lot because there's a lot of it online. I went with there was this comedy group out of Australia called the Janoskians. They were this group of like 15-year-old pranksters. It was pitched to me as, this is the Australian version of Jackass that you'll be working with. I'm like, oh, this is ideal for an event. Fortunately, while at first everybody was trying to like ham it up for the camera and be crazy and wild, it didn't take long before activity actually started to happen. And then the comedians settled in and took it seriously, maybe out of fear to some degree, especially when one of their names was called out. Also, just due to energy drain. There was this time where they all started sick at the same time, like their stomachs hurt, their heads hurt. I don't know if they were attacked. I was the only one not being an ass in the moment, and I felt fine. So maybe there was something to that. I don't know. It didn't seem like they would be the types to psych themselves out about things, and they definitely weren't trying to be like their personas are. Anyway, so there's a lot of that's on YouTube. You can find it on your own. Just looking for Linda Vista Hospital, Janoskians. You can even find, looking directly on my channel, search Linda Vista Hospital. I do a recap video at the end because their video is, again, over the top. It's big. And I do a video where I'm kind of responding or replying to what they put out there. So I want to talk about what to talk about, because LA, man, there was between downtown LA, which, by the way, I always love the origin of the city of Los Angeles because it was bookmarked for so long. Spain sailed past what we now know as California in the 1500s, and they thought, oh, over there, that we have to remember that that's there. We want to claim that area, and then they just sat on this knowledge for about 200 years, and then the 1700s. And the big global expansion of all of the superpowers, they're going out and claiming land. And they thought, if we don't claim California for ourselves, Russia is going to get it. So what they did was they sent 11 families from Mexico to come up into California and stake a claim. And of course, Russia ended up being pushed further north. I mean, they were probably working their way down, because they came through Alaska first. But so Spain was coming north. They set up a couple of little villages, but they would get washed away by the LA River. And then finally, they moved away from the river and set up camp in what is now the area known as Olvera Street, basically. It's just north of downtown LA. There's a plaza with a big, oops, hey, there's the mic, with a gazebo, and everything grew out from there. And it's kind of remarkable that so much of that location is still exactly as it is today. It's been in the 1970s, they went through some huge restoration, and that location is so preserved. There are so many, the oldest residence is still there. There's a very, very old church in the area. At the time, we're moving ahead to the 1870s at this point, but the Pico House is built on that same plaza, and that was built in the late 18th, early 1870s. I think actually in 1870. And at that time, that was just boy, I can't remember if it was 5 story or if it is 5 stories, something like that. It's not huge, but at that time, it was the largest hotel and most luxurious west of the Mississippi. Um, there are so many hauntings in this location. There's a haunted restaurant, the first Mexican restaurant in LA, which is still owned by the same family that opened it. Villa Adobe, the oldest house in LA down there, is haunted by Don Francisco Villa and the wife he left behind when he passed away. So his widow is still there. I guess not anymore. They're both, and then the Pico house itself. There's so much activity there, and I'm not even going to get into it. If you want to read about that, head on over to othersidepodcast.com/blog, where I talk specifically about the Villa Adobe and the Pico house. I guess I will talk about La Gondoliera, the restaurant. First off, great margaritas. Definitely go to LA, take a tour, walk around this area, kick it off right with a great margarita there at that restaurant. That is a location that, again, it dates back quite a ways. And what I love is that it was first built to be a winery. So some of what you'll see inside, like they've got this grand fireplace, and they've got some I don't know, aspects of the building that kind of don't make sense for a restaurant because it wasn't intended to be a restaurant at first. And there's still a little bit of a nod to its wine making past, and the fact there's grapevines that grow over the alleyway behind the building. And also, one of the things I love a lot is that the center column, this big wooden support, is actually reclaimed shipwreck material. It was the mast of a ship that beached itself off the coast of LA, and they brought that in and incorporated it to build this location. It has become known. Well, first off, there's a woman that's seen there. So visually, the most common sighting is of a woman that's kind of seen. It's kind of it's an oddly split level location. When you go there, you'll see that it's not exactly 1 story, 2 story. They kind of, the hallway, I guess the 1.5th floor, there's a ghost of a woman in white that's seen. She's also seen in, I think, the offices on the 2nd floor. But what's more actively going on there is objects moving on their own. And talking with the staff before we got the tour company started, that's what they shared with us, is that how much trouble they have anytime they need to make a renovation or just kind of get a handyman in there to do some repairs around the location. And that is, a contractor will be going, he'll make his measurement, he'll be hammering his nails, make another measurement. And then when he reaches down for his hammer, it has disappeared. But it's been on the exact opposite side of the room. So like something is just tossed to the side. And so now to combat that, nobody works alone. They work in pairs at least. And I guess one person, it's their job to be the spotter for the tools. And that is something that you see on occasion at haunted locations, or even locations that then become haunted. Anytime you change to a place, it might stir up some activity. And that's something we see over and over and over again. Sometimes the activity is just done at the end of it. But sometimes if some changes were done that whoever is hanging out there after the fact is not fond of, they will let it be known. So I'm going to talk about 2 more locations on this podcast or broadcast. It's the Mont house, and then we will end with a story relating to the most famous murderer in LA history, Charles Manson, and the iconic mass murder. And I like there, as soon as I said Charles Manson, viewership dropped off. Too late at night to be talking Charles Manson, and I get it. So first, I will talk about the Mont house. This is a house that is just up the mountain from Hollywood Boulevard, so it is right just off. I mean, it's rolling distance. You can roll down the hill and end up in the heart of Hollywood. It is kind of behind where the Hollywood Tower is, which is an iconic place. It's where Humphrey Bogart first stayed when he moved to make his name as an actor. It's a very haunted place as well. It's rumored, and at least it's visually definitely true, that at the Tower of Terror, that Disneyland ride, and then Disney movie with oh, dude, the guy from Police Academy. Not important, but it's going to bug me now. Mahoney. Who played Mahoney? Gutenberg. Yeah, Steve Gutenberg movie. Tower of Terror, directed by my friend, Mr. DJ McHale. So the Tower of Terror is based off of a hotel in downtown Hollywood, and I'll tell you, it's a creepy elevator. We actually did a video, we put it out there, but we got into this place. We got into the elevator. We decided to try to go up to the roof. Of course, if you guys are Disney fans and you've ridden the ride, and if it's in LA, it's California Adventure, and I'm not exactly sure where it is within Disney in Florida, but the idea is that lightning strikes this service elevator and it becomes this Twilight Zone-y. You go into a different dimension. I think actually that ride is gone now. Now it's all Guardians of the Galaxy. When you hit the call button, the elevator arrives and it's got this, the doors are this fogged, smoked glass. So you can't quite see through it, but there's this red fog light that comes in, just this ominous, it's arrived feeling. And you go in and then the doors close behind you. And the inside wallpaper feels like a Rorschach test, just ink blots all over the place. And this is actually not one of the places I'm trying to talk about, but now I'm on the topic. And so it's so busy that when I first got in, I couldn't see where the buttons were because there was just so much going on around me. And the doors closed immediately. I thought, how am I going to get out of here? So there was actually a brief moment of panic. And it is just a very old rickety elevator. So yeah, I get why people believe, I don't know, or get creeped out in that location. The building is haunted. It was front row seats to a massive mafia hit where Bugsy Siegel killed one of his good friends right out in front of it, just kind of around the corner, but right there. And there's all sorts of other legends of mafia activity at the location, including people being thrown out of windows, which I think that's probably more than a little over the top. I think there would be a witness or two. Mafia doesn't usually operate that way. They do some grand things, but throwing people out of windows in downtown Hollywood is not common practice. However, there's a rock photojournalist that lives in the building, and she knew her room was haunted. And she started talking to her neighbors and other tenants of the building, and it seemed like everybody had ghost stories. And so she's been working to talk to everybody that lives in the building and put together a tome of all of the reports. So hopefully that eventually comes out. We've been hearing about this for a long time. I would love to read it. I think the book would do well because, well, first off, the word is out there that it's in the works, and it's Hollywood, all sorts of scandal probably associated with it. But up the Hollymont, up just about 2 blocks from this building, when I was doing the tour company out there, I was driving around this 15-passenger massive van that was kind of difficult and unwieldy, but I would still be able to get it through downtown Hollywood traffic. But I could never get it up into this area. So I loved it when I was booked for a private tour because I would only have 2 people. I'd be in my own vehicle. You get is this place that's infamously known as the Hollymont House. So the story goes that in the 1970s, there was a UCLA student that was attending a party at this house, and the party was interrupted by unseen forces. Objects started to throw themselves across the room, which, okay, poltergeist activity. It's still cool and interesting, but it's not, super unique. But no, the action that was going on here was intense. Objects would chase people around where people are running from room to room, and the things are turning midair and continuing to follow them. There's a woman in one of the stories where she's pinned up against a wall because some unseen force is holding a chair that's just keeping her there. So this UCLA student goes to Barry Taff, who is the head of the parapsychology department of UCLA, and is still to this day the head of the parapsychology department at UCLA, which hats off to UCLA for having that kind of a department. He's like, well, this is insane, but I got to check it out. And Barry Taft is known. He's done a lot of investigations. I'm actually going to talk about him in the next location as well. He's done a lot of research. The Entity case that was so well documented that a movie was made starring Barbara Hershey in the maybe early 80s. It took place in the 90s. in Culver City. He was the lead investigator of that one. And I meant to start off the episode with this. Speaking of iconic, legendary investigators, hats off and in remembrance of Lorraine Warren, who passed away today, apparently, or at least the news broke that she passed away today. She was 92. The person that she with her husband Ed were some of the original ghost hunters. 92 years old, and she's been doing it doing it for 60 years. She's a controversial figure, but anybody that's kind of going out there and making such claims is going to be in the crosshairs. But she never backed down from anything that she was reporting, and I think she helped. She and her husband Ed helped a lot of people that are going through bad times feel like, well, it's okay to talk about this kind of stuff. And it's never easy to do. People more over and over just continue to badmouth you or second guess you or think you're in it for the money or something. But people oftentimes are going through hell just in their personal life, living in a place where they're being tormented. And, if nothing else, Ed and Lorraine, and of course, Ed passed away in 2006, so they are both passed on now. They provided an arena where you could talk about this, where, hey, we, as the Ghostbusters say, we're ready to believe you. So she will be missed. Will always be a controversial figure, but she was such a part of so many important cases that a huge part of paranormal history was just lost today with her passing. Anyway, back on topic. We're talking Barry Taff. We're talking about the Hollymont house, and we're talking about objects that are flying across the room, chasing people around, holding people up against the wall. Even stories of knives flying around, chasing people around. It's scary. So Barry decides, I'm going to go knock on the door, introduce myself to the homeowner, and see what's up. Was this kid on drugs, or is there really this kind of intense activity going on here? And the owner of the house was totally open and receptive, and he said, yeah, no, it's legit, it's for real. And apparently this, whatever it is, didn't care that so often it's like, oh gosh, when I'm here alone, there's all this activity, and as soon as somebody tries to see it, it stops. Not this case. It made its presence known immediately to Barry as well, to the point that coins appeared out of thin air and rained down on Barry Taff, to the point with such ferocity that it created welts on him. I mean, it was really hitting him hard. It was hailing coins that manifested out of thin air. So he's like, okay, well, I got to investigate this place for real. And so he spent a lot of time there investigating. He brought a priest at one point to try to do a blessing. And as soon as the priest walked through the front door, his hat disappeared from his head. Well, that's odd. They had all sorts of bizarre things going on. And I was considering when I was doing this A to Z challenge that A should be for apport. And I always like to spell it because it's an unusual word, just Apport. It's French. It means door. But it's an apport in the paranormal sense is an object disappearing from one place and reappearing somewhere else. Kind of like we just heard about at the restaurant down on Olvera Street. So in time, the owner of the house had enough. At this time, he had been there for 7 years, and he knew immediately upon moving in that, yes, there's activity here, but then it just built more and more and more and more to the point that he couldn't handle it anymore. House is up for the market. He wants to get out of there. But before I go on to that, during the investigation and during just reading the house, they found that there was an underground tunnel that ran from this house to the house next door. No idea. I mean, as soon as there's a tunnel, people assume bootleggers. Well, I mean, you're just going next door. I don't really know. Nobody knows why there was a tunnel there. However, they did find a headstone in that tunnel. It was I'm going to not remember the name right now, but it was a woman's name was on it. And so they've always just kind of spirit by the name on the headstone. They did investigations, actually trying to see if there was a body there. There's not a burial there, so it's only a headstone. What's it doing there? What in the world? No answers to that one. So anyway, so the owner is going to move out, leave the house behind. Barry would love to continue investigating, or at least just offering his services to whoever it is that moves in next. So he leaves a message on UCLA letterhead, explaining who he is, that he's here to work on the house and investigate. If you need anything, just let me know. Leaves it on the kitchen counter or the dining room table, something like that, something very obvious, and waits for a phone call. Time goes by. He never gets a call. So I think, well, maybe the activity died out when the owners moved, and maybe the new owners aren't experiencing any activity at all. So then weeks later, he gets a phone call, and it's not from the owners of the Hollymont house, the new owners, but it's from somebody else in the same neighborhood asking why there is a letter written to the owners of the house on UCLA letterhead, offering his services, and they found it in the pantry in their kitchen. So we're talking about objects disappearing from one place and reappearing somewhere unusual. This note left property, traveled within a neighborhood to another place, just kind of unbelievably. And actually, I didn't even finish the story with the priest who walked in the door and the hat disappeared off his head. They went through the whole day investigating and trying to bless the house. At the end of the day, the priest goes back out to his car to drive away and gives the house one last look back and notices that his hat is on the roof. This is one of the most extreme stories involving extreme locations involving apports that I've ever heard of. And I'm fascinated by that one. I've got so many great apport stories, some of my own, others that I've collected like this one. So when I was doing the tour, again, I couldn't usually go up there unless I was doing a private tour and had a smaller vehicle because they are tiny little mountain roads. And so one day I happened to have just a couple on a date, and I pull up and I'm telling the story about the house. And then somebody comes out of the house and takes a seat on the curb and is just having a cigarette sitting on the curb, but obviously came out of the house, which is a little bit embarrassing. I'm telling stories about the house that you live in. But I'm like, well, this is too good of an opportunity. I gotta say hi and ask what's new, because these stories come out of, the 70s or 80s. We haven't heard a lot lately about this location, and it's privately owned. So unless the owner's putting stuff out there, you're not going to hear about it. So I go and I walk up to this woman who's having a cigarette, minding her own business, and I say hi. And before I could ask much of anything, it probably started like, I've been doing some research, or I like local history. But before I could get to the point at all, she just says, yeah, it's still haunted. Like, oh, cool. And she was waiting for a ride. So I said, hop on in. We'll drive you to wherever you need to be, but talk to us about the house. And she talked about how it started as so many horror movies start, where other people were experiencing things and she never did. And she kind of called it out, like, let me know you're here. And then it let her know that it was still there. On one occasion, she was prepping the house. She was going to decorate it for Halloween. And in the chandelier, she pulled all the light bulbs out and replaced them with red lights to give it that nice, cool, spooky glow and feel. She walked out of the room. She walked back into the room. All of those red bulbs were out of the chandelier, sitting on the table now in a perfect circle. So apparently whatever was there did not like the idea of red lights in there. And actually, thinking back when Barry Taff was investigating the place, they had a long, big piece of fabric that appeared out of nowhere and wound itself up in that same chandelier. And it said they needed two people on ladders to slowly unravel it because it was so just wound up in there. And so I told this woman the stories that I had heard about the location, and telling the story about the note disappearing from one person's house, from that house, and reappearing in one of the neighbors' houses. That kind of made her open up a little bit about something that I think maybe bothered her in the past, but she didn't necessarily know it was paranormal. And she said, well, I've got a little odd, you could tell she was a little bit embarrassed talking about it. But I've got this kind of comfort food thing that I do, that if it's been a hard day or a rough week, I just jelly beans and champagne. It's like, that's what I like. I have some on hand. If I ever need it, it's there. And she said, there's one day I went to grab it and it just wasn't there. And I know it was there, but I never, ever found it. And so that's when I told her, well, one of your neighbors may have been treated to some complimentary champagne and jelly beans. But that's something that's very important to note and very unique about these types of ports. It's usually the object that goes missing isn't something mundane that you wouldn't notice if it was missing. It's either an emotionally connected item, a sentimental item, or a necessity item, like your car keys, which, and like me, videotapes. I've had tapes disappear and reappear. It's been incredible. And we've had, again, house keys that vanish and then reappear somewhere absurd. So that's kind of the MO for a port. So the fact this was something that was kind of part of her that disappeared, it made sense. It lined up. That's a place that I would love to investigate. And ironically, the owner of that place owns the Vogue Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, which is really well known as being a haunted location as well. So moving on to our last location of the day. First up, I do have to rant like an old man now, like an old person now, because I've given a speech. Actually, coincidentally, I gave a speech at UCLA 2 years ago, and I had a conversation yesterday as I was giving a speech in a high school just yesterday. Nobody knows who Charles Manson is anymore. Nobody knows about the Manson murders, which I don't know how that's possible because it's constantly in pop culture. But I was going to tell the story, and I did a lot of filming at this one location on Cielo Drive, next door to where the Sharon Tate, the biggest mass murder happened. And I'm never going to release that stuff because the guy that owns the house, while I had permission there at the time, he's kind of a wacky dude, and I just don't want to bark up that tree at all. So this is the perfect place for it to me able to talk to you guys about it without releasing any footage. Maybe one day I will, but I'm still going to let more time pass. So yeah, anyway, I was telling the story at UCLA, and I start to list off the victims, and I was watching the room, waiting for the light bulb moment to be like, oh, he's getting into the Manson murders. Interesting. Cool. And so, a couple go by, and unless you're really into it, you might not know every name, but then you start to say like Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger. And I thought some people might perk up at that point. And then finally I'll say Sharon Tate, and everybody was going to be like, oh, here we go. No reaction at any point. And I stopped myself and I said, wait a minute. Does anybody here know who Charles Manson is? And there was just blank stares. Nobody in the room had heard. And we're in California. And it's still, I will never understand how this is kind of eluded. It has timed out, or I've aged out of being able to talk about it. But anyway, so Charles Manson, we could get into this for a very, very, very long time. And no, I'm not going to do M is for Manson now that I'm thinking of it. He had his group of hippies, and he wanted to bring about this helter-skelter disarray, mass chaos. He wanted the world to fight itself. He wanted just chaos and destruction widespread across the mainstream. And how he thought he could get away with that is by creating a race war, and by killing white people and making the white people think it's these Black Panther extremist types, and everybody else, they'll be able to sit back in their little camp and have sex and smoke up and just sit back while the world burns. And that's what he was going for. And there's so many fascinating facets of what Manson was doing and what the family was doing and what they were all about. But again, that's a huge topic. One night in 1969, the kind of the moment that ended the summer of love and ended the hippie movement and all of this was when a number of people, including, you always hear Sharon Tate's name because she was a movie star, and also she was 8 months pregnant at the time too, and she was married to Roman Polanski, who directed Rosemary's Baby and other films as well. But if you're watching this, Rosemary's Baby is all you need to hear. Mass murder, just so many people killed, violently for no kind of retribution, but just to do the social experiment, basically. And so just that house Eventually Trent Reznor bought it and he recorded there. I think can't remember, I think it was Pretty Hate Machine was recorded there, as well as there was a Tori Amos. Uh, Under the Pink was recorded there. So he did some recording there, and he was buying into it. Like, oh, cool! It's Manson. It's gothic. It's dark. He was very industrial musician. But the more he lived there, and the more understood what it was all about, the more sickened I think he was about the fact that he was, I don't know, being this grotesque tourist about this tragedy. So eventually, when he moved out, there was a door that had the word pig uh, drawn with blood on the door from the victims. He kept that for himself. And maybe it's in a museum now, but I think he just has it himself. But he bulldozed everything else because he was just afraid of it landing in the wrong hands. And which is very, very possible. So the house where all of that tragedy happened does not exist anymore. There is a massive, gaudy mansion on that property now. The people that live there are too high in to want to talk about anything about their past. Not their past, of course not, but the past, the dark past of that property. So until they move out, and if cool people move in, we're probably never going to hear anything more about what's going on actually at that land. However, just a couple doors down is a house that has been featured on a bunch of TV shows. And it's a location that Barry Taff, again, with the UCLA parapsychology department, he has studied, he has visited many times. And apparently, according to him, that location has been studied as a geomagnetic anomaly, that there's so much energy that's coming up through the mountains that it's haywire. The readings that you would get. And again, I had the opportunity to visit this location twice. Oh man, it's nuts. So something that I think is important to note is that this location is not associated with the Manson murders, although just a couple doors down is where all the action happened. But this location is a big energy field. There's so much energy coming out of the mountains. There are ancient, extinct lava tubes well under the mountains. Is there something that's going on here just naturally within the earth that is creating the ability for spirits to come across more easily because there's just so much more energy in the air? That's the theory. Also, you have a house, all these houses are anchored. You've got these big pieces of metal that are going deep into the mountain to try to keep it in place in case a landslide happens. The building will still be standing. So are these acting as kind of a lightning rod or an antenna amplifying the energy up into the house? Another thing that people point out is that there's this 3-story long spiral staircase that's all metal. That is, maybe it's continuing the conduit, just kind of continuing to bring this up more and more and more. Something that I think is noteworthy. So I went there with, the first time I went there, I was with, I'm trying to remember. No, the first time I was there, it was just myself and Connor Bright, who was my partner during doing the LA Hauntings, the tour company. She was my co-host and co-researcher and explorer. The first time we went there, he was giving me the tour and, there's a little, I've got trinkets here. He has this area where there's all these like Beetlejuice action figures and they fall over. Like, well, we're in LA. We're on the side of a mountain. These are little precariously stood up things. I don't buy anything could happen. I don't know. And he's going through telling the stories and yada, yada. And he's got this puppy that is just jumping all over us like crazy, just like a puppy would. And the puppy is with us as we go through the top floor and then the middle floor. And then we start to go down the staircase to go to the lowest floor, and the dog does not follow. It doesn't set foot on that step, which that was the first thing that showed me this is weird. Well, the dog is too young to even be trained. Don't go down here, but the dog's not coming along. Like it has boundless energy to a point. We go down to the lowest level, which I guess you would say is the basement, but because we're on the side of a mountain, just all windows are facing out. So you're still getting natural daylight in. So it doesn't feel like a basement, although it's the lowest level. And really quickly, I began to feel pressure pushing on my head. And, kind of like that sinus pressure. Actually, it really felt like if you were swimming underwater, very far underwater, or if you were coming in for a landing, taking a plane ride, just like kind of intense pressure on my head. And I kept, kind of trying to equalize, doing the whole nose blow trick. And my ears would pop, but just still be tense. And he gave us the tour. And there is an area in the back of the building that is exposed, so you can see the mountainside right there, which is just kind of unique. And I did have I had a compass with me, which is a great way to. I was testing Barry Taft's statements that the geomagnetic electricity in the area is just off the charts, and indeed, the compass needle would spin, or it would point one way and you walk across the room and it'd be pointing a different way, or it would just never really stop moving. It would just kind of constantly be meandering. So there was absolutely some sort of interference, natural interference, which is still fascinating and worth noting. Maybe, again, getting back to that theory, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the Manson murders. It's just coincidental that they're right there. Or maybe we always have some spirits, some people that we don't see that are hanging out around us. And then you walk into a place like this where there's just energy all over the place, and it's very easy for them to manifest, to make their presence known. That's a theory that I find real fascinating. Eventually, and we ended up talking in the basement, in the lowest room, the most. And I mean, 2 hours or so. And again, the entire time I was feeling this pressure on my head. And at one point I even had to put my hand on the wall because I was getting so dizzy, it was hard to stand. I've never experienced anything like that before or since. I was trying to, explain it away. Like, well, we are up in the mountains. Although, come on. I've lived in LA for years and years. I've been up and down these mountains like crazy. There's nothing's ever made me feel like this before. So I don't know what it is. And I don't say anything for the most part because I hate saying something and then somebody yes ands it. And then suddenly there's a snowball effect of, oh, I know. Oh, now I feel this. So I kept it to myself until the end. And at that point I said, I felt super uncomfortable. I felt this pressure. Has anybody ever talked about that? And he kind of, I don't know, he likes to be cryptic. So it's hard to really read too much into this, but he said that, next time you come here, they'll be used to you. So it'll be okay. Well, who knows? So I do go back in about a week from this moment. And I brought with me one of my best friends, Max, who, again, you've seen in many other videos, and Mary Serwinski, who was my research partner when I was first researching the book, Voices from the Chicago Grave. And she, in that time period, had gone from a believer to a straight up skeptic. So, but I thought she's also a big fan of LA history and so the fact that we're near the Manson location, not that she's, as you would call a death hag, but she was interested in checking the place out as well as a skeptic, which I always love to bring a skeptic in. And we go through the same experience, taking the tour on the top level and going down to the next level and hearing about this, that, and the other. And then we walk into the basement and we walk into the door. And fortunately, I do have this on camera. Again, I might show this sometimes during live speeches, but I don't post this since it's inside somebody's house. She gets pushed. Something pushes her into a lazy boy recliner, and she's freaking out. She's like, something pushed me. No, something pushed me. And she's like confident, without question, certain that some unseen force, she felt some person push her into the chair. And she knows that, the lights are on. We're not doing a lights off investigation or anything like that. But without question to her, she was pushed. And after a little while, she sees the camera is on her. She starts to kind of button up a little bit, and she's less freaked out about it. But that was amazing to me that the only psychic this night, or the opposite of that, the only skeptic this night was physically pushed by some unseen force. And I was down there, again, probably for an hour, maybe more this night. We were trying to do investigations, EVP, whatever gadgets we had with us. I never experienced anything that night at all. Except Mary was pushed, but also the fact that I didn't experience anything that validated to me what I did experience that first time I went down there. So there's that. There are so many other haunted locations around Hollywood and LA that I love talking about. If you have any stories that you want to hear about or stories that you want to share, That's what What's Your Ghost Story is all about. This part always feels like the telemarketing, not the telemarketing, but the telethon. So call in and pledge today. But no, I really do. I don't need your money. I want your stories. So share your stories. Let's have conversations. If you've been enjoying this series, we will do M tomorrow, and I don't know what M will be. So if you have any suggestions for the letter M, what paranormal topic should we talk about? I guess if nothing else, I'll talk about the Mothman, which is something that I find fascinating. And I have visited Point Pleasant with my incredible girlfriend, fiance, Wendy Lynn Stotts, who, hats off and congratulations. She just graduated her drummer camp. She's already a actual rock star and award-winning drummer, but she just finished a very impressive camp out in California. She'll be coming back tomorrow, so congrats to her on this late evening. But if you have suggestions for the letter M, please put them in the comments. Head on over to facebook.com/what's your ghost story. You can leave comments there, or head over to the website, which is just what'syourghoststory.com. Have a great rest of your Friday night. We are late. We are partying. We are telling ghost stories. If there's any other LA or Hollywood ghost stories you want to hear about, drop me a line and I will work it into an upcoming show. Thanks.